What's going on, kinfolk? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I wanted to share with you a little more about my failed marriage. In last week's video, I shared with you where I was mentally and emotionally before I got married and while we were dating. I explained some of the red flags I saw waving but ignored because I didn't trust my own judgment. I also explained why I didn't trust my own judgment. So if you haven't seen that video, go watch that one first and then come back to this one. In this video, I'm gonna share with you guys where I was mentally and emotionally on my wedding day and during my marriage. I struggled with this subject for a long time because the most important thing for me when I share my story is not to bash my exes. I was afraid to share my story because I was afraid of how my ex-husband, for the sake of his privacy, we're calling him Kyle, would respond when he finds out that I gave this information. No matter what I say, he's gonna get angry, but my story is my story. And it's incredibly important for me to share my experiences in hopes of helping other women to not make the same mistakes that I've made. But I also knew that it was even more important for me to be in a place where my heart is pure and I no longer held any grudges or resentment towards my ex for this experience. The purpose of this video is not to out him for what he did. I pray for him all the time and I pray nothing but the best for him. The purpose of this video is to vulnerably share my story and where I was mentally and emotionally in the process in order to help others, because I feel the perspective that I had during these phases of the relationships could really help other women. So with that being said, let's just get right into it. So if you want to hear where I was mentally and emotionally on the wedding day and during the marriage, then keep on watching. Okay, so on the wedding day, I'm not even gonna lie to you. I had so much anxiety. Not because of the thought of being married to him. I actually had peace about marrying him. I knew in that moment that I wanted to spend my entire life with him, but I didn't want a wedding at all. We initially agreed that we would just have our immediate families and best friends there, and we would not have a wedding, but we would just sign the papers. But as time went on, he started to want to add things and add people, and it ended up becoming something that I never wanted it to be. I was so frustrated by this. It frustrated me because when we had the conversation about what we wanted in a wedding, I said that I ideally didn't want one at all, and he was like, oh, I agree, I don't want one either. But then when the time actually came, all of a sudden he kept changing his mind about some things, and it really irritated me, but also it resurfaced my concerns about him just being agreeable instead of telling me what he truly wants and feels. But I let it go. I had so much anxiety about this wedding. I did not want this wedding. I just wanted to marry him without having all eyes on me. You guys know that I have major social anxiety, so this was horrible for me. Before Andrea and I even left the house to head to the venue, I'm not gonna lie, I had quite a few chugs of Fireball. My social anxiety was at 100%. He and I even had an argument that morning because he kept wanting more things that I clearly said that I didn't want. And he, a month before, agreed and said that he didn't want those things either. So that was adding so much stress to an already anxiety-ridden situation. I was just completely frustrated and irritated that he kept all of a sudden saying he wanted these things that we had already agreed that we're not gonna have. So yes, I drank. I chugged Fireball before we left the house, and it did help take the edge off. When I walked down the aisle, which I did not want to do at all, and we agreed that we wouldn't do this, but he last minute made it a huge deal, I hated the fact that everybody was staring at me. All I could think was that I didn't want this wedding. But when I saw him, I still had peace about being with him. I remember when my arm is in my dad's, and I specifically, as we were walking down the aisle, I specifically asked the Lord if I should run, because I was going to. I told him if he wanted me to run right now, that I would. And I very clearly heard the Lord say, Shanna, this is part of your journey. So I said, okay. Marriage had always been my biggest fear and my deepest desire, and I took it very seriously. I never thought in a million years that divorce would be part of my story. And I definitely never thought that I could make a mistake like this. My spirit is just so sensitive, and I'm always before the Lord about everything that I do. But just like I had no business even getting into a relationship after the relationship I had just gotten out of, I definitely had no business getting married after having recently gotten out of a relationship with a man that I thought I would end up with, and it ending with so much damage done. But in that moment, all I could see was this amazing man, and everything that I had ever wanted in a spouse was standing before me, and I wanted to spend my entire life with him. We went through premarital counseling, and even our premarital counselor said that we were the healthiest couple that they had ever worked with. We went through every subject and even went through all of my concerns about him being agreeable and all the red flags that I had. And we talked it all out and worked through it all. We finished premarital counseling feeling 100% confident about moving forward. My mom said that she felt good about it all until we were saying our vows. And when the pastor said the part about forsaking all others, she said I lowered my head. And then that's when she knew that something wasn't right. We had a little issue previously because I'm the kind of person that will always have my family's backs. And my mom needed my help storing her four-wheeler, and she had this huge lawnmower, riding lawnmower at my house in my garage. So without question, I stored them for her because that's what we do. Well, Kyle wanted her to come and to get this stuff before we moved into our new house. I didn't understand what the big deal was. I mean, I would have happily given up my parking spot in our 3-car garage in order to store them for her because she didn't have the space or the resources to move them or store them. But he wouldn't let it go. He didn't want her stuff in our home, and he nagged me almost every day until she came and got them. I didn't even think about this, but at the time, he had a truck. And my mom said that she wasn't even going to make it a big deal, and she wasn't angry until she saw that he had a truck and never even offered to help her move the stuff. She had to rent a truck and rent a storage unit. She drove an hour and a half to my house to come and pick them up, and then she had to drive an hour and a half back to where she lived, all because he didn't want them on our property because he said it'll make our yard look messy. Now, in retrospect, I blame myself for not putting my foot down. It was definitely a red flag for me that he had an issue with me helping my family in this way. I mean, I thought, what's gonna happen if they need my help in the future? I'm not gonna be able to help her because he won't let me? And I do understand that when you're married, there are certain boundaries, but something so simple that costed nothing to us except space in our garage or in our yard just seemed really cruel to me. But I didn't trust my own judgment again, so I just overlooked this too. Once we got married, I just felt so overwhelmed. I really loved him, and when I looked at him, I felt like I was so blessed to have a man like him. So I didn't understand why I felt so sad all the time. I mean, I was sad all the time. I kept feeling like I made a really huge mistake. But then I felt really guilty because he was so amazing. He was so understanding and so loving when I was struggling with being depressed. And I was really depressed. Before we got married, I told him that I did get really depressed sometimes. And he said that he loved me and that we would work through it together. And I was like, I don't think you really understand. It can get really bad sometimes. And I told him that I didn't think that he would be able to handle it. But he insisted that he loved me so much and that we would work through it together. I just wanted to make sure that he understood what he was getting into in regards to that, because I would never want to blindside anyone with depression. I needed him to make the decision whether or not he wanted to deal with that. And I wouldn't have been mad at him if he said that this just was something that he didn't want to deal with. I would have actually respected him for that. So during the marriage, he was so loving, and I would cry and I would apologize to him for having to deal with this. I felt so bad. But it didn't help how I was feeling when I started noticing certain things about him that contradicted who he claimed he was when we were dating. He was so nitpicky. I mean, so nitpicky about everything. And he was really anal about everything being so perfect all the time. I mean, I love the fact that he was a clean person. He was really clean, and I appreciated that about him. But when I'm in the kitchen cooking and he's following me around with a sponge, it gets really annoying. I always cleaned up as I went when I cooked, and it was as if nothing I did was good enough. And I will say also that I had a conversation with him about it, and he was really understanding and just very sweet about it. And he did lay back and stop following me around with the sponge. So it was really great. Like whenever I would confront him with something, he would always like be understanding, and then we would work through it, and it was great. We were always able to work through stuff like that. And I will admit that sometimes I had a huge attitude. I am definitely no angel, but I truly did love him, and I took full responsibility when I was wrong. And actually so did he. We both equally contributed to the arguments. We were both equally ridiculous sometimes, but we worked things out so well. Like we communicated so well, and we always worked through it, and I felt like we were growing stronger each time. My attitude sometimes came from the fact that there were just a lot of inconsistencies about him, and it contributed to me feeling like maybe I've made a huge mistake. He was not the laid back, fun, and funny guy that he was when we dated. He had moments of being that person, but day to day, he was obsessive and always frustrated and angry about the smallest and most insignificant things. He wasn't generous to others, and there was something that just was not right about it. But I thought I was being ridiculous because I still didn't trust my own judgment. I eventually started going to counseling because I wanted to work through whatever these emotions were so that I could get past them, because it wasn't fair to him. But then I went to a couple sessions by myself, and then I suggested marriage counseling to him because we had some other issues that we needed to address. He didn't want to pay for it, but eventually he agreed. So counseling went really well, I thought. We had only 2 sessions, and I felt like we were on the right track, but I still didn't understand my own emotions. Long story short, on Super Bowl Sunday of 2017, we were in the kitchen and we were cooking breakfast, and he was being really snippy. I remember just being I just broke out in tears, and I was like, "You are miserable, aren't you?" We had this long conversation about how we both feel, and maybe we rushed into things. With the pressure of the house and the pastor asking us all the time, "When are you getting married? When are you getting married? What are you waiting for?" We felt like maybe we got caught up in all of the excitement of everything and maybe made the decision to move forward prematurely. So we decided that we were going to continue going to counseling together and fight like hell for our marriage. But we also decided that if it just wasn't working, that we would make divorce an option, but not for like a year after that. But fighting like hell for our marriage was number 1, and divorce was only going to be an option if we fight and it just doesn't work. We both cried and we hugged it out, and that was pretty much that. He didn't like me talking to his stepmom, who I was really close with, about us, so I was going to decline her invitation to go over and hang out with her for the Super Bowl. But he insisted that I go, and he said that he was okay with me talking to her about it. So I did. She was devastated. She strongly encouraged me to make sure that we work it out. I was so confused about all of it because he and I had so many little issues, but we also had this huge intimacy issue that just didn't make any sense to me. We waited to have sex until after we got married, with the exception of 2 slip-ups, I will admit that, which we repented for. We felt so guilty, and we repented for the encounters, and they weren't bad. The encounters weren't bad, but they were the first time, so I thought it was just normal for it to be a little bit awkward. But when we got married, it was just not a good experience for either of us, I think. I'm pretty sure he feels the same way. I had never had issues in relationships in that department before, so I didn't understand, but he really wasn't doing anything to try to make it work in that department either. Before we got married, I even asked him if we were going to have issues with sex when we got married, because something just fell off. And he got so angry with me. He got angry because he felt like he was trying to do things God's way, and he didn't understand why I was questioning it. Waiting for him was just so easy. He wasn't even struggling with temptation or anything. I mean, it was so easy for him to not have sex with me. So it raised a red flag and made me question whether he was even attracted to my body. And that for me was a really huge issue that I brought up in premarital counseling over and over again, because I knew my body was the type of body that he wasn't attracted to, and I learned later that he truly wasn't attracted to my body at all while we were married. So once we did get married, we barely had sex. I could count probably on 2 hands how many times we did it. So the fact that there was no passion in our marriage was making me question whether I married the right person. And if I'm going to be completely honest, and I know I'm going to catch some heat for this, but I'm just going to be 100% transparent, I did think about how intense the passion was in my last relationship, and I wanted passion like that. I didn't understand why we were struggling so much in that department. My stepmother-in-law was so devastated, and she strongly encouraged me to not even say the D word. She said we can work through this, and I didn't disagree, but I wasn't super hopeful either. So the next morning, I ended up calling my mom, and she was like, Shanna, no, God is not going to honor that. You need to stay and you need to work it out. Divorce should not be an option at all. If you made the wrong decision by marrying him, then it's your responsibility to pray and ask the Lord to make a way out of this. But you do not get a divorce just because it's hard. And of course, I agreed. And when I got off the phone with her, I really felt kind of silly for saying that divorce should be an option in the first place. We should fight for our marriage, period. My thoughts were, I mean, he's so amazing. Like, he is worth the fight. So when I got off the phone, I ended up going into our bedroom where he was getting ready for a day job. He worked nights, but he was getting ready for a job that he worked sometimes during the day. And I went to him and I was like, I love you. I know this is tough, but we're amazing together. I don't want divorce to ever be an option for us. We can work through this. His response was, what? Are you serious? Why are you all of a sudden changing your mind? He was pissed. I'm over here in complete and total shock. I mean, I thought he was going to hug me and say that he agreed and he loved me too, and he didn't want divorce to ever be an option either, but instead he was angry. He said he couldn't believe that I was changing my mind, as if we had already decided to get a divorce. Divorce was not the conclusion of our conversation. We said that we would fight for our marriage, and if we fight, after at least a year, then we would consider making divorce an option. But in his head, he heard divorce and that was it. So the next few weeks, I was just so confused. I had no idea what just happened. We went from, we're going to fight for our marriage, to he can't believe I won't agree to getting a divorce. So I continued going to therapy and even got to the point to where I knew it was time to cave and go to the doctor to talk about getting on an antidepressant. I knew that if I was going to do my part to try to save our marriage, getting my depression under control was the first step. I was going to get over my fear of not trusting God by taking medication, because that's what I felt. I felt like it wasn't Christian and I didn't trust the Lord if I get on an antidepressant. But I knew I had to let go of that because I knew my depression no longer just affected me. It was affecting my husband as well. And I had to fix this problem. So I got my prescription and I went home and I told him I got this help. He was so irritated about it. He was so upset that I was working on myself to heal our marriage, and he was just done. During this time, I spent a lot of time at his stepmom and sister's house. And with his dad, we were all just trying to figure out what the heck just happened. I mean, I was so confused. Kyle swore up and down that there were no other women involved, but I wasn't so sure. Men aren't typically the type that can move on from a relationship unless they have someone else already lined up. Women can be like that too, of course. But men generally are worse at being alone, in my opinion, at least from what I've observed. So this didn't make any sense. But Kyle said that he didn't want to be in a relationship ever again with anyone, and I couldn't prove that he was seeing someone else, so I just let it go. As time went on, more stuff came to the surface. And I won't go into detail about all of it, but I will say that when we dated, he told me that he had been engaged one time in college, but he also said that he had never been in another serious relationship after that. Well, I found out in these very strange weeks that he had been engaged 3 times before me, and that I was number 4. I couldn't even believe my ears. If I would have known that, I would have never married him in the first place. To me, that shows impulsivity and a lack of good judgment. Now, if it happened before he turned his life over to God, then it would be one thing. But he claimed to be a man of God, so I would not have been able to overlook that at all. So before this point, I told him that I would give him the ring back. And I was definitely encouraged to by his family. But I also felt that after our conversation in the kitchen, we both agreed that we both moved too quickly and the pastor put pressure on us and all that. So if after we fought for our marriage and it didn't work, then I decided I would give it back. But once I learned about these other engagements, I asked if he got the ring back from all of those, and all 3 of the other women gave their ring back. That's when I decided he was about to learn his lesson today. He was not getting that ring back. You can't just propose to woman after woman and then clean up the mess financially and pretend as if nothing ever happened. He gave me this ring along with a promise, and it was all a lie. So after that, lies upon lies upon lies came to the surface. I literally felt like I was in the twilight zone. I didn't say anything to him about the engagements because his family asked me not to, because I wasn't even supposed to know. No one was supposed to know. And at that point, I didn't really see the point of bringing it up anyway. I mean, I just took mental notes and then started my investigation, and I dug deep. But as I worked through it all, I realized that this all makes sense. As I spoke to specific family members, I saw that there were family patterns of secrets and lies, hiding information or pretending it didn't happen or the person never existed. And honestly, it makes me sad for him. I pray for him and for them that the Lord show them how unhealthy that is. It is not healthy to just bury all of your issues. It's okay to make mistakes, and God gives grace, of course, but that doesn't mean it's okay to act like it never happened. You still have to acknowledge the situation, not bury it. This was really hard for me to work through because I loved all of them so much too, and I thought that they genuinely loved me. Of course, I expected them to support him because, he's their blood, obviously, and I would never expect anyone to choose sides. I feel like choosing sides is immature and unnecessary, but I just didn't expect to be shunned by the family. So that was something that I really had to work through with the Lord because that really hurt me almost equally as bad as his lies. So then, long story short, I got an email from this amazing woman of God who got a word from the Lord on my behalf. She told me things that there was no way that she could ever know. And she told me that she noticed that he was liking inappropriate pictures on Instagram. I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know that you could see what other people were liking. And when he and I were dating, we had a specific conversation about social media. He's the one that brought it up. And he said it's important for us to protect our hearts and not follow people that are the opposite sex so that we can make sure that we do everything in our power to keep ourselves from temptation. I was so impressed by the fact that he even suggested that, but then I was confused after we got married when he would follow women on Instagram who posted suggestive pictures. He always first got mad at me for even making it a big deal, but then later apologized, and we moved forward. But I didn't realize until I looked that he had been liking inappropriate pictures the entire time we were together. I did confront him about this, and oh my gosh, he got so pissed at me. I was so numb at that point because of all of the lies that all I could do was stare out the window and ask the Lord for help. He yelled at me and he couldn't believe that I looked at what he was liking. He was like, "So what, are you the Instagram police?" This goes to show how much you're really trying to make this work. And honestly, I don't even think I responded. I just sat there quiet because I already knew so many of the lies that he kept from me that he had no idea I knew about. So I had realized I had no clue who this man was at this point. Soon after this conversation, I decided that I had to find out more. This was my life at stake here. I mean, we aren't dating, we're married. So I had to take extreme measures. So I ended up logging into his Instagram account, which I don't normally do this kind of thing, but I knew that I had to. And by doing this, I learned that he had been liking pictures of half-naked women all the way back since before we dated, while we dated, and after we got married. Then I learned he was talking to other women on Instagram too. In that moment, everything clicked. There were a few times during our marriage when I thought things were good between us, but something fishy happened, and I felt in my spirit that he was with other women. I never thought in a million years that he would ever cheat on me. But the way that he reacted when I asked for details about where he was when he didn't come home until 3 o'clock in the morning spoke volumes to me. He got livid. Not just angry, but livid. But in those circumstances, he was the one who acted questionable. So the fact that he got upset to the point to where he even slept on the couch downstairs didn't even make sense. So this was a time where he accidentally answered his phone but didn't realize that he did. So I heard him walking out of some place. He called me back and then made up some excuse as to why he couldn't answer his phone. But I said, "You did answer your phone. You just didn't say anything." And he said, "No, I didn't." And I'm like, "Yes, you did. I heard him walking out of some place and getting into his car, turning his car on, and then he hung up. After he blew up at me for questioning him, I just let it go because I had no proof that he was cheating, and I thought maybe I was just being insecure. I knew that during those times where I knew in my spirit that something wasn't right, during a time that I never thought he'd ever cheat on me, was my spirit telling me the truth. It wasn't my insecurities at all this entire time. My spirit was screaming warnings at me before we got married, and then after we got married, it was still screaming things at me. I was right about every single red flag, every concern, everything that I found questionable. I was right. I didn't trust my spirit because of the last relationship I was in. I felt like I was just tripping, like I was just trying to find something wrong with him because he was white or because I was afraid of change. But the entire time, I was right. There were a lot of other things that happened in those weeks where his true character was revealed. I felt like I was in the twilight zone during this entire time. My amazing husband became someone I didn't even know and someone that I didn't even like. So in that moment, after the Lord revealed the truth that he was hiding from me, I just knew it was the end. I could just feel it. Now, if he would have apologized and then taken all of the necessary steps to earn my trust back, then I would have forgiven him. But when I confronted him about liking those inappropriate pictures, and when he found out I logged into his Instagram account, because I asked him several times in order to give him the opportunity to come clean if he was in contact with any women on or off of social media in any way. I mean, I asked him if he had spoken to any women on social media or anything at all. And he looked me in my eyes and told me, no, I would never do something like that. I think I asked him probably a good 10, maybe 15 times, and each time he told me no. But when he found out that I logged into his Instagram account, he asked me if I logged in because I kept asking him so much. But I asked him so much because I wanted him so badly to just come clean. So when he asked if I logged into his account, I said yes. Well, my exact words were yes. And I'm glad I did because now I know that you're a liar. And his response was, how could you do something like that? That's your way of wanting to work things out? I can't believe you would do that to me. How could you? And in that moment, I had taken the cross off my back, put it down, stepped into the fiery flames where I cussed him out so hard that even Jesus stepped out of the room until I was done. I was so pissed. I went off. The next couple of weeks were rough, to say the least. The crazy thing was that I was even willing to try to work it out, but he wasn't willing to stop talking to the other woman. One time, he asked me if we could ever work things out. And my response was, are you willing to stop talking to this woman? And he said, I mean, things aren't really good with us. As if things had to be great with us before you're willing to stop talking to her. And then on top of that, I went and spoke to his family about everything that happened only because he was lying to them about everything. So they would come to me telling me that he wants to work it out and that he loves me and to fight through it. But then to me, he would say he doesn't want to stop talking to these women and that he doesn't want to work it out. So I told them the truth. And the fact that I told them, along with the fact that I logged into his social media, he felt it was too much damage done to him and it was just too much to be able to move forward. And all I could think was, how the heck did I end up with this fool? As the days went on, it just got more and more weird. This person was not at all the man I married. I was at a point where I was actually kind of scared and I had no clue who this man was. It was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I knew that I needed to get out of there and get out of there fast. At that point, I had no clue what he was capable of. He lied about so many things and I didn't believe anything that he had ever said. He would go out till all hours of the night, come home drunk, then act like I was wrong for saying anything about it. So I decided that I was going to move out into an apartment because I just needed to leave. He knew about it and he agreed to me leaving. Although in the end, he was really angry at me because he wanted us to stay in the house as roommates so that we could could split the mortgage and the bills and so that he could save that money. But I would have rather lived in a cardboard box under a bridge than stay in a house with him. So there was no way in hell that that was an option. I couldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. So there was no way I was going to share a roof with him. So I left. I was so mentally and emotionally exhausted that I didn't even know what to do with myself. This entire time we were married, I blamed myself. I blamed myself for being depressed. I thought that that was the reason that we were having issues a lot of the time. But then I found out all of the lies and the deceit, and I was beside myself. I could not get out of there fast enough. But at this point, I was just so grateful to God for exposing him and for putting me so heavy on this beautiful subscriber's heart, because if she didn't obey what the Lord revealed to her, then I would have never known that he was cheating and lying to me this entire time, and I would have continued to blame myself. So even though I was devastated, more than anything, I just felt so grateful. Now, in the next video, I'll talk with you about the process of moving, where I was mentally and emotionally moving forward, and then I'll talk about my first relationship post-divorce. I never shared much about why that relationship ended, so I'll share my post-divorce journey with you then. If you want to know when my next video is posted, hit that notification button. But for now, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, comment, share, subscribe, and help me to continue growing my family. I'll see you guys in the next video.